Ever see the statue The Thinker by Rodin? Try mimicking his pose. It's difficult and painful, just like the act of thinking itself. And thus, Rodin's The Thinker is a perfect representation of thinking itself. Welcome to the FIC podcast. I'm Dr. Susan, and this is the place where we talk through the most important issues in our lives. Unlike other podcasts that may attempt to get to the root of these issues, this podcast offers 3 major value adds that are going to make all the difference in improving your life. First value add, I'm going to break down exactly how the false information gets propagated and how people fall for the tricks time and time again, and why it's so hard for you to change someone's mind, but so easy for that same person to be mind hacked by the popular media. Value add number 2, I'm going to offer solutions. Sick of all the problems, right? Time for solutions. So this is about knowing what they hide from us and getting empowered. Truth shall set us free. Real truth makes us calm, resilient, brave, and indestructible. And that's what this podcast is all about. Getting the truth so that we can live free without having to ask for permission from anybody. Value add number 3. I've compiled all the research I present here, plus added extra bonus material to help everyone live a life of free thinking, truth, and liberty. And you're going to love the title, The Voodoo They Do on You. The book will be released in the near future, so please stay tuned. So why this podcast? Because it's all about freedom. Freedom is our right, and we are here to take it. So welcome, welcome. You're probably an anti-nonsense person, and so you belong here. However, if you enjoy being mind-controlled and fiddled with, well, sorry, this just ain't for you. In fact, if you do stick around and you are someone who likes to be diddled with, I am sure you will feel triggered, faint, and or cry. So, if you are here for anti-nonsense, let's do this. And you're probably saying, well, who the hell are you? Well, as I mentioned earlier, my name is Dr. Susan. I'm a PhD in education. I've specialized in curriculum, and I woke up full throttle to the shenanigans of this world around 2009. Now, I always had this instinct, this what would you call an anti-authoritarian intuition that kind of sensed the BS. You know, while you're in school, you're listening to the history lessons, you're watching the TV, you're reading the newspapers, and things are just not adding up. Now, the reason why I couldn't wake up before 2009, or not just wake up, but just kind of come to terms with all of the disjointed, double speak, and all of the contradictory information that we were being fed, the reason why I couldn't just sit down and kind of organize it before 2009 was because I lacked 2 vital things. 1, mental clarity, and 2, courage. And so through this podcast, I'm going to be teaching mental clarity and courage, not just uncovering the hidden truths, but also teaching how to get this mental clarity, how to get the courage to live the free life that we are all entitled to. So when I was able to finally give myself the permission to listen to my own thoughts instead of the thoughts forced upon me by our trusty government schools and universities, our government-sponsored Hollywood movies, and yes, the government subsidized action and war movies as part of their propaganda machines. And if you do a bit of research on your own, you will see that the U.S. Department of Defense funds a lot of movies, including Marvel movies and many political movies dealing with war. And Canada, which is my home nation, also has a government that subsidizes movies and TV shows, including their news outlets. And you know, if government is paying for something, it gets a say in what the outlet promotes. So what information gets disseminated and what information is censored. And yes, I see the irony of this. The government pays for it with our money. So really, we are paying for the government propaganda and in the end to screw ourselves over. Anyway, when I decided to do my PhD, I came to it with the understanding that education is a government tool and not a service. The main takeaway from our schooling has always been that government will solve all social problems. pitch your government, write to your representative, vote. Your vote matters. That's you're exercising your democratic right. Bad politicians are blamed for the bad results, but never the government. The government is pure. It's just a matter of getting the right people in government and hoping that they will do the right things. Well, what a bunch of wishful thinking. And that is not what this podcast is about. It's about reasoning and thinking deeply, not thinking wishfully. And you know what? And then they'd never teach us how to even use our faculty of reason when you really think about it, when it comes down to it. How the hell are we even gauging right from wrong? How are we even deciphering what's morally correct and what's incorrect, or what's best for society and what's best for everyone? How do we do that? We don't even have a way of telling the difference. All we have is emotional manipulation. And I'm talking about schooling and mass media and popular culture. They don't even give you a way of discerning these things. Now, in this podcast, we're totally going to break it down. But before, coming to this kind of knowledge and systematic methodology of breaking down discourses and propaganda, you kind of feel lost, right? You're swimming in a sea of information, some of it false, some of it truth, and how do you know? Things are not packaged neatly like this is truth and this is fiction, like they would have us believe, like the way libraries are organized and saying, okay, this section is for, fiction and this section is truth. Yeah, right. All we have in mainstream culture is emotional manipulation, confusing legalese, distraction on purpose. So much so that people just get overwhelmed and follow what the made-up faces in Armani suits on TV tell us is the right thing. And so that's unfortunately how we know what's right from wrong. Did Anderson Cooper tell us? Did NBC News tell us? Did Fox News tell us? Did our camp that we belong to, our side of the social issues, tell us what's right and wrong? We were never taught to discern fact from fiction. Instead, we were just taught how to tell if a book is labeled fact or fiction, without regard for the facts or the fiction inside of those books. Then we have this horrible concoction in vogue now called fact checkers. Oh my God, what a bunch of baloney. Now, falling into the trap of believing only that which is fact checked by supposed unbiased fact checkers who are bought and paid for by the institutions that they fact check is a most disempowering way to live. Now, we have, and I'm serious, we have the capacity to discern for ourselves. We can use our capacity of discernment to distinguish fact from fiction. We were just never given the tools, and we were just never given the opportunity. Until now, of course, because now we have so many resources, right? Like now we have people coming out on different media outlets and different platforms emerging, and so now people are given options about what is a trustworthy source and what's not. And this podcast would like to add to those alternative sources of media. Now, for me, I am completely different than what I've seen in social media and pop culture, which is why I'm trying to fill in a gap. So I'm not, I don't take any sides on the left or right. I don't even believe in sides. And I come to you from a very researched and a very reason-based. I'm not emotional, and I've actually studied a lot of the social constructs, but also a lot of the biology and natural, the natural or the innate creations and the innate elements of our world. So I'm able to put the pieces together of, social constructs and actual nature. And so if we just throw nature out, that is an extremely wrong idea. And if we throw everything that might be socially constructed, we just throw that idea out the window, that's also extremely wrong. And also, in my opinion, if we just say, you know what, government sucks, to hell with government, I am not of that opinion. I think I'm probably more of a minarchist, not an anarchist, and I can explain that in a different episode why I believe that we need a little bit of everything. So we need a little bit of understanding of, nature and biology is very important, but we also need to understand social constructs because that's also very important. And in fact, that's how mind control works. We also need an element of public service. Now, the governments that we have right now in America and in Canada, which is what I'm going to focus on because that's, how in my graduate studies I focused on North America, we don't have government as a public service. And so that's the problem. The problem with the government that we have is tyrannical and absolutely based on illusion and of abusive control. And so that is a problem. So, if we just say, okay, because government, the way we have it, the way we conceived of it is wrong, therefore we shouldn't have anything that might be considered a government. I also think that's wrong because we can also think about it as, capitalism. What we have right now in our economy is not pure capitalism. What we have is crony, corporatism, and we do have a lot of socialist elements, okay? So you cannot call our system capitalistic, but if we say, okay, there are capitalistic elements, or the way that people have tried to, conceptualize or implement capitalism in our modern world, let's say post World War II, if you want to complain about that, or post 1970 or wherever you want to put your historical marker, and so you're going to throw out capitalism, I think that's wrong. So the same thing with government. I don't think that just because government right now, as we've seen it, is horrible, it doesn't mean that it cannot be implemented as a public service. And same with capitalism. It doesn't have to be crony corporatist. It doesn't have to be abusive. And in fact, a lot of our biggest achievements in liberty and in wealth is 100% due to capitalism. Similarly, many of our strides as communities and as neighbors and as literate human beings has a lot to do with having a public service in the form of a government. Now, that government, of course, the way I conceptualize it, would not be anywhere the same as a federal government that we have in America and in Canada. I really believe in local and small. So that's what I talk about government. I just local and small, and in the interest of the people. Okay, but I am going to talk about that in a different podcast. But right now it's just the pilot episode where I just want to give an overview of where I'm coming from and what I am offering. So I developed a system based on reasoning and understanding psychology. Okay, so I come from this. I have a master's in educational psychology, and as I said, a PhD in education curriculum. And so I use my understanding of psychology, science, education, and philosophy. And I created this system to help us get through the muck of all of the misinformation and the disinformation, and so that we can arrive at a place where we can see clearly, where we will be able to live freely, and we won't get sucked into the netherworlds of the popular groupthink or manipulation. Now, for me, when I started my new lifestyle of thinking freely and living freely and doing no harm, like having an actual explicit motto to do no harm, I actually lived a more calm, centered, principled life where I feel 100 million times better than I ever did feel trying to keep up with the contradictions and emotional manipulations of mass media. So in this podcast, I'm going to give lots of episodes, and each episode will teach something new, like a new way of seeing old things, or maybe even a time-honored way of seeing new things. So in both cases, we're going to learn how the world really works. And this in itself is going to develop our critical eye and help us start thinking critically until we are critically thinking on autopilot. So stick with me, as this podcast is designed as infotainment, I hope, but also a way to develop critical thinking. And of course, freedom. That's the ultimate goal, to live freely without worry of other people imposing their beliefs on us. And believe me, you will be able to think clearly and critically and creatively through any problem, probably after just one season of the FIC podcast. Now, unlike most other podcasts, I'm not taking sides, as I already mentioned. I even think that the idea of sides itself is a form of manipulation. And so I actually consider taking sides or labeling yourself a certain faction is kind of a deception that unfortunately that we might accept and impose on ourselves. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, what's your example? Well, do you guys remember that nonsense of Kony 2012? Well, I remember that fiasco, and that to me would be a great example of a propaganda campaign that actually worked on the masses. You know, I wasn't around for World War I or World War II or the Vietnam War or anything like that, but I was around for 2012. I was also, of course, around for the nonsense of the Iraq War in 2000, was it 2002? But I think that one has been really I think that it has been exposed enough where I don't really need to go into it. But for Kony 2012, wow, what a fiasco. Now, I sure remember this, okay? I remember my social media being flooded with unfettered support for the makers of the video. And the video of this whole phony Kony campaign began with an admission that it was a social experiment. Yes. It literally started with the filmmaker saying, "This is an experiment," right at the beginning of the video. And, you know, right after that, the viewer was taking on an experiment. It was a ride of Hollywood tricks to win the sympathy of its audience, the magic of fiction writing coupled with manipulative cinematography. So never mind that this phony Kony kicker had died sometime before the video had even been made, and never mind that the cute little black kids who were featured in the movie were paid to read a script. Never mind that, you know, the company which backed the video, Save the Children, was known for scamming over and over again. And never mind that it was a viral video made so by Facebook, all right? And somehow the masses just jumped on the bandwagon and started believing the bullcrap and vowing to do as the bullcrap master said. And so in this phony Kony video, they were saying that you have to buy some sort of package. I don't know how much it cost, $30 American maybe. And, you know, they were going to paint the town red on a certain day. I think it was Hitler's birthday or something. I'm not sure. I think it might have been Hitler's birthday that they were going to do it. And, you know, obviously nothing came out of it. But people did buy those dumb packages to support this campaign. So obviously the campaign made a lot of money, and it was just a huge scam. Now, I at that time was doing my practice teaching, and I remember one of the teachers at the school I was doing my practice teaching at was giving this horrible horror story of a homework to the students. This is what she told them to do: buy Kony 2012 kits and sell them to everyone you know. Can you believe this? Like, this is so preposterous. Like, what the hell was wrong with this teacher? Okay, let's see what she did. She watched a political video on Facebook, and this video was filled with so many lies. Like, if she had taken 1 second to do any kind of internet search on any of the ideas it presented, it would have, you know, had several red flags popping up. But of course, whatever. So she watched this video filled with so many lies, didn't even bother to check the information that she believed in. And it was a video made by a content creator that nobody had heard of up until that point, okay? So not even somebody you could say was, oh, well, they have credibility and they built trust over. No, you didn't even know this person existed until you watched their phony Kony video. And then what did she do? She forced her students, and I believe they were grade 7, she forced her students to fund this political operation. You know? It's like, I thought that school was supposed to be apolitical. Of course it's not, and I'll get to that too in another podcast. But come on. Now you might say, oh no, Susan, she's just a dummy, but she had good intentions, and somehow I'm supposed to believe that having good intentions is an excuse for making bad things happen. Like, she was a cause of horrible things. She imposed her political ideas on the students. She made them pay money. She made them support this scam. She forced an ideology on them, right? In a forum where she holds authority, and the students just have to say okay. They don't really have a choice, right? Because it's a coercive environment, the teacher and the student. You don't want to piss off your teacher and then think that, okay, she's going to be my teacher for another 6-7 months. She's going to make my life a living hell. So that's coercion and abusive behavior is what she did. So there was a lot of unethical elements. But not only that, it's like the whole excuse of, oh no, Susan, just a dummy with good intentions. Listen, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. So it does not matter if you only have good intentions. You need to have reason to back up your good intentions. You need to make educated, informed decisions, not just decisions based on what you feel is a good intention. It's never enough. And that is why the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And rarely is anything good ever done in the name of doing good. That's weird, right? Well, that's because good usually results from other actions that provide fringe benefits rather than concerted efforts to do ambiguous good. So good things are usually a result of doing things that need to be done, or things that are like necessities, or creative, or like artistic. And then there's fringe benefits. Okay, there's fringe benefits, and then good gets as a result of that one. But when people kind of set out like, I'm going to do good, then what they're really saying is that I know what's good and what's bad for the world, for the 7-8 billion people out there. I know what's good and bad for them, and I'm gonna impose my ideas of what's good and bad, and my ideas of what reality is, and somehow good things must result from that. And we cannot know what good is for everybody, okay? And that is because you would literally have to understand the individual you want to do good for, and then do good based on their expressed needs, not on your global assumptions of what's good and bad. So in other words, you need to do good locally, so in your family, because you know what your family wants. Or, if you're a teacher for your students, after understanding who your students are and explicitly asking them what are their needs, and how can I benefit you. But without having this kind of direct understanding of what somebody needs and what somebody wants, you're just imposing your assumptions. And that is why we have this old adage, charity starts at home. Help your neighbor. You don't just go and start helping somebody who's 10,000 miles away from you. You don't know what they want. But if everybody does charity at home, well, guess what? The world is going to be better. And yet, for some reason, people just don't think that's glamorous enough, to do local good, to do good for the local community. And that is why I started to really think in this way, where, you think locally and act locally. Unlike today's destructive motto, which is think globally, act locally. Oh my goodness. You see, think globally, act locally basically tells you that you know better than the locals who you supposedly want to help, and therefore you should impose your global ideas onto them. Okay, so you would say like, I know what you need based on my understanding of things that are far away, things that are abstract, things that are not local, but things that are global. No, no. If you're going to help somebody locally, you need to know the local environment. You need to know the local people and what do they want, what do they need, what are their problems, and then you can start offering your solutions. So you never want to impose global ideas or ideals onto anyone. And this really should set off an alarm if anyone tells you about being global citizens or, thinking globally and acting locally. Because this motto seriously teaches us to hold up the ideology of globalization, globalism, and communism. Okay, and if you're not sold on the idea that communism is a bad thing, well, I can also break that down in another podcast. Now, we can't rely on our emotions or our desire to be do-gooders. So doing harm in the name of doing good is only doing harm, which is why I really don't appreciate when people say, well, I had good intentions. Oh, he had good intentions. Or, the reason for going to war was based on good intentions. Listen, how about you just don't do any harm, right? So we must all use our ways of knowing in a synergistic process. We must combine our intuition, our intention, and our faculty of reason before making decisions to do good. Okay, and you know what's actually better than setting out to do good? And I just mentioned this, but what's better than setting out to do good is setting out to do no harm. Okay, and this principle is found in medicine. It is the fundamental basis for medical practice, to do no harm. You see, their principle is not to do good. Their principle is to do no harm. And of course, the moral, the moral police on earth, they're going to come and tell you, oh, it's not enough just not to do harm. We must also do good. Well, pipe down for a second. The reason why the fundamental principle in medicine is to do no harm is because when you approach life and the world with the intention of doing no harm, you are forced to think about the consequences of your actions. Okay? You are forced to think about the consequences of your actions instead of just thinking about how lovely the actions might make you feel. So when you want to go out and do good, you're really just thinking about how wonderful it's going to make you feel when you think that other people are going to feel good. That is not a reasonable way to live life. What you want to do is think about, what are my actions, and are my actions going to have negative consequences on other people? If so, I'm not going to do it. What are the trade-offs? Like if my action is going to hurt somebody, then I don't want to do that. And if you understand that, then you realize that you're doing something good. Now imagine you said, I am not going to go to war because that hurts people. Well, that's achieving peace. It's simple as that. So if you say, I don't want to go to war because I don't want to harm anyone, that is achieving peace. Whereas other people, they're trying to achieve peace through war, right? Oh, I'm going to go have a humanitarian intervention, and I'm going to kill thousands and thousands of people, and sometimes even millions of people, and somehow that's going to bring about peace. Or I'm going to go and start talking about all of my ideals and all of my values, and somehow that's doing good. Instead of saying, you know what? I'm not going to impose myself if it's going to cause harm. And then that's going to create freedom and opportunity, which is a good thing. So you can actually bring about good by doing no harm. Okay? And vice versa, you can bring about harm by setting out to do good. So the truth is that doing harm and doing good is really difficult to discern, as is truth and fiction. And what we really have to understand is that there are no division lines. There's, I'm thinking of the song Subdivisions by Rush. All of those divisions are meant to control, manipulate, and force a homogenized way of thinking about the world. But in reality, everything contains an element of truth and an element of fiction, an element of good and an element of harm. And that's our tough job as conscious beings, right? To be able to scrutinize everything and to start understanding how we actually come to understanding what's right and wrong. And then what we'll see is that everything is contextual, and that the real way to understand what to do and what actions to take is not by a set of decontextualized policies or laws or rules or formulas, but by understanding what the consequences are of your decisions in each situation. Again, this is actually easier than you may think at first, and practice using the exercises and discussions in this podcast are going to get you totally empowered to make the right decisions for your context and not for someone else's agenda. And the secret on how to do this is no secret. It's just something people fail to do because they either think they can do it, that they can't do it, or they think that they are already doing it, when in fact, of course, they're not. So what is this so-called secret? It's just use your faculty of reason. And when I say reason, I do not mean common sense. So somebody, some Rush Limbaugh fan is going to be like, yes, common sense. I don't mean common sense. I mean the faculty of reason. That faculty of reason that Aristotle and Plato talk about, and that is embodied in The Thinker by Rodin, the statue of the thinker. That kind of reason where it's contemplative, it's difficult at first, it's painful because you are really thinking about the consequences of your actions. Now, we have this amazing thing called the faculty of reason. It is one of our senses. What? I thought we only had 5 senses. No. We have way more than 5 senses. And, I know why they just teach us 5, that there's 5, but you know what? I think it's okay to teach kids under 6 that we only have 5 senses, but after that, it really is just a bunch of misinformation, and we need to stop teaching that. So we have more than 5 senses. One of our most powerful senses is our faculty of reason, okay, which is the ability to discern fact from fiction, right and wrong. Now, I'll talk about our numerous senses in another episode. But here, let's just understand that using reason and logic is not a luxury, and yet people find it too expensive. And what do? They just end up jumping on bandwagons because, some famous person told them to do. Or, they thought that they would feel better about themselves if they do. Or, they were worried that people would label them a bad person if they didn't. Okay? Now, people who, kind of try to shove you into, do-gooder and evildoer, right? Evildoer reminds me of George Bush. They fall into two kinds of calibers, okay? So, if these people are coming in and forcing their ideas and saying, you better jump on our bandwagon, because that will make you a good person, and if you don't, you're a bad person. Well, these people who come and really uphold this kind of mentality fall into 2 calibers. One, they are people who fail to use their reason, or they might be the second type, which is people who think you are a person who fails to use their reason. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. So people who try to create bifurcations of the way the world works. You're either a good person and you're going to jump on the bandwagon, or you're a bad person and you're an evildoer. They fall into 2 calibers. One, they might be a person who fails to use their reason, or 2, they are a person who thinks you are a person who fails to use their reason. So when these 2 kinds of people talk, they use cognitive levels that are just so low. Let's just be honest. Like, the intelligence level is just so low when they try to bifurcate the world like this. Like, you're either this or you that. Like, as if we are a computer code, 0 or 1. Okay, now you can consider their discourse or the way they speak as a kind of baby talk. And unfortunately, we have allowed this gaga gooey to take over the major airways. And I personally am sick of the silly bifurcation and ad hominem attacks and running away from reason and resorting to gibberish and gagas. And yes, that is why we have a creature called Lady Gaga, because she emits nonsense. Gaga, okay? And people just soak it up. They suppress any kind of normal reaction that would help them see that Gaga wearing a dress made of raw meat is something only a criminally psychotic person would do. Okay? And that publishing necrophilia music videos should be a cause for concern. And yet, the Gaga projects her grotesqueness and people applaud. Oh, and yes, because she tells them in her dumb song, Applaud, where she explicitly mocks her fans and followers for applauding her debauchery. Now, somehow, she was wearing meat suits and Kermit the Frog suits and had necrophiliac music videos and just the most disgusting kinds of just grotesque acts that you could imagine. And then all of a sudden, she comes to us, like the mainstream media comes to us, presenting Lady Gaga as a professor of righteousness. And then they have her like singing, first she's singing about not bluffing with her muffin, and then you see her singing at that corpse's inauguration this past January, right? So Lady Gaga is now presented to us as a leader of humanity, and we're just supposed to forget what a disgusting creature she is. Now, these appointed garbage bags that pass themselves off as leaders of humanity are either completely blind to the way the world really works, or they're total sellouts with zero integrity. Okay? That's the kind of people who would just be so gross and then try to impose their ideals in the world. We don't need to impose. If we are good people, we don't need to impose our values and ideals on anyone. We would just lead with our principles and inspire others. That's all we would have to do. We wouldn't do things by decree or by fiat or by mandate and impose our own views on others. Now, these, self-professed or appointed leaders should never be taken seriously, okay? Especially as they dispense their garbage on us about what's good and what's bad, what's right, what's wrong, and they certainly should not be listened to when they spew out ways to solve the problems that they cook up. They cook up the problems, and then they offer us a solution that gives us less than what we had before. So they create the problem, and then they offer us a solution that is giving us less than what we had before. So worse than the problem itself. A real solution would never be a diminishment of what you have. If a solution takes away from you, it is not a solution. It is blackmail. And I am not interested in being forced to give up my dignity no matter what they threaten me with. So yeah, we are going to get to the bottom of all this false narratives, fake news, lies of history, the propaganda and basic BS of the world that serves to do nothing but keep us down and in the dark. So welcome, 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 welcome. It's my honor to have you part of the show. And you are always welcome to contact me through the website First in Class. I hope to get it published soon. There's a lot of information on there. And just to let you know that this podcast will be published twice weekly, once on Sunday and again on Wednesday of each week, as a little treat on those days that need a little dose of creativity and inspiration. So mark your calendars for the journey, and we're going to have a great time. Thank you so much for joining me in our pilot episode. My name is Dr. Susan, and I'm wishing you a pleasant day.